Well, a warm welcome to you all to this, the 8th in our series of RHEA Talk webinars, this one to discuss security for space. We've already discussed some aspects of cybersecurity on previous webinars, including the use of cyber ranges for training. So if you're interested in viewing this or any of our previous RHEA Talk webinars, please visit the media section of our website on www.rheagroup.com. So now to the webinar. Firstly, let me introduce myself. My name is John Bone. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for RHEA Group, and I will be your facilitator for today's session. Please use the Q&A area in your Zoom app at the bottom of the screen to pose questions to our panel members, which I will ask after an initial discussion. If your question is targeted at a specific panel member, please make this clear in your question. So, talking of the panel, today I am joined by 3 distinguished panel members who are here to give you an insight into how the space sector is adapting to cyber threats, considering every element of a space mission needs to be protected against attack. So we have Doug Wiemer, who's our own RHEA's Chief Technology Officer for Cyber. Doug is responsible for the management, development, and delivery of cybersecurity related services to government, agencies, and industry. Doug started his career as a communications officer in the Royal Canadian Air Force and went on to gain experience in a wide range of ICT related disciplines, particularly in the area of cybersecurity. Doug has led and contributed to several patents and has served as chair of NATO research task groups related to cybersecurity, information assurance, and cyber defense. So welcome, Doug. Next, I have Stefano Iannitti. Stefano is the head of the security authority of the EU Agency for the Space Programme, otherwise known as EUSPA. Stefano started to work on space security in 2003 at the Italian Space Agency, focused on the security aspects of Galileo. He joined EUSPA, the former GSA, in 2007, where he set up the security accreditation framework for Galileo. He is now very busy with the setup of the security governance of the EU space programme, and in particular of its new components like GovSatcom and a space situational awareness program, space surveillance and tracking. And Massimo Mercati. Massimo has been head of ESA Security Office and the Security Authority of ESA since January 2019. He is responsible for the space security domain, corporate security domain, and cybersecurity domain of ESA. He is also responsible for the strategy and the security policy and framework of the agency. So welcome, Massimo. For those of you not familiar with RHEA, we are a security and space engineering services company with over 700 employees across Europe and Canada. RHEA's focus is to add value to our customers through the delivery of specific expertise, technologies, and techniques. Today we're focusing on one of those technologies and expertise area, that of cybersecurity. So, Doug, with your CTO hat on, could you give us an overview of the landscape of the cyber threat within the space environment and tell us how that landscape is developing for the future?
Thanks, John. Yeah, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today, and thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. So, yeah, maybe just before kicking off directly into the space threat and cyber threat for space, I'd just like to emphasize that space is becoming critically important to our society, economy, and overall our security and national sovereignty. Space data and communications are growing in importance every year. This is witnessed really by the huge growth in satellite launches. If you look at the decade leading up to 2018, for example, there's been about 2,300 launches that took place. Meanwhile, since 2019 alone, there's up to 1,000 launches per year. And so this is really emphasizing the importance of space and that space data and space-enabled communications are really central to our everyday lives. We have an increasing influence of space applications, increasing dependence on those space applications. There's definitely an increase in private investments and overall an increase in value in the process and technology related to space. And of course, all of this creates a corresponding increase in the threat levels for space systems. The so-called new space, for example, with increased commercial industrial involvement in delivery and operation of space systems, increases the potential for financial gain. And of course, where you have potential for financial gain, you will find cybercrime, intellectual property theft, ransomware. There's all kinds of motivation for cybercrime. But it's not just limited to cybercrime. There's no question that the war in Ukraine has demonstrated an increased overall cyber threat at a nation state level. It's put space and space systems directly into the crosshairs of cyber conflict. You consider, for example, the attacks on Viasat. You consider the response, even from the commercial industry by Starlink, for example. There's no question that space is a critical infrastructure target of cyber attacks, and that both nation states and commercial industry will be affected by the way that we approach the problem. Consider also the role of vigilantism. And the potential for independent operators launching attacks, and likewise the response of independent operators in this whole area of cyber conflict. In a way that when you look at the vigilante approach, there's not much different between that and, let's say, private or independent militias in a kinetic conflict. The challenge here is that cyber attacks may result in a significantly wider collateral and uncontrolled damage. Kinetic attacks are still quite localized. Even if they may be large scale, they're generally quite localized. And in the case of cyber, that may be much harder to control. And so certainly this whole cyber landscape is growing and evolving. And that's further accentuated then as well by changes in the whole infrastructure that is used to deliver on space. And so, for example, look at the convergence of IT and OT systems, information technology and operations technology. Critical operations technology processes are now running on quite common IT platforms. As access to space is becoming cheaper, faster, simpler, this dependency on these kinds of IT technologies is growing, and these IT technologies are inherently difficult to secure. All of that makes space systems a primary target for cyber criminals and cyber attack in general. And that escalates the need then for secure systems development right from concept through to decommissioning. And so that emphasizes the need for things like secure systems engineering, security testing, security monitoring, and incident response at levels that maybe haven't been necessarily appreciated in the past, specifically for space. Meanwhile, there are also certain technology trends that create game-changing events in security for space with much wider consequences, much wider influence. Look, for example, at the whole area of quantum computing. Quantum computing has the potential to render our foundational cryptographic processes as obsolete, and the space domain is actively responding with significant investments in space-enabled quantum key distribution techniques and quantum communications infrastructures. But as we look at quantum key distribution and these quantum communications infrastructures, we need to make sure we also don't forget the need for example, for quantum safe or quantum resilient cryptography. The end-to-end secure exchange of the keys is one aspect, and we have to look at the security of the interfaces and how all of these things come together. Whenever there are new technologies and new approaches that come into place, then there's always cases where weaknesses in the design and the development of those things may lead to areas that could be compromised. And so again, secure systems engineering, secure security testing, all extremely important. If we look at, for example, the advances in 5G and 6G technologies, 5G controls are already intended to address threats inherent in some of the 4G and earlier network technologies. But as with the quantum, any adoption of new technologies always presents an opportunity for new threats. Current deployments, for example, of 5G will be delivered in parallel with 4G. And so anywhere you have these parallel technologies, there's an opportunity there that there is something that's not covered in terms of the overall security resilience of the system. And so we have to look at the weaknesses in the interface points. We have to look at legacy systems and how legacy systems are being addressed. And implementations, again, we need to make sure that those implementations address all of the vulnerabilities in design and implementation up front. So again, secure systems engineering, secure security testing, or system security testing. We look at in the convergence there of the physical and cyber domains. and we start to look at the complexities of the space domain, we have things like radio frequency interference, for example, jamming and spoofing of telecommand and telemetry signals, interference with data segment. All of these are important aspects that need to be looked at and how they may operate in combination with other more traditional cybersecurity attack techniques. And so this increases the need for radio frequency interference monitoring, both on the ground and in space. We need to start to monitor these things more actively throughout the whole spectrum. And so again, we start to see how this converged cyber and physical monitoring and incident response, it's not enough purely to have an IT-oriented response mechanism. It really needs to go beyond that. We start to look then at the response mechanisms, and we start to maybe assess how does artificial intelligence-based decision support maybe play into this. And so our security monitoring and incident response technologies, for example, the SIEM tools, the SOAR tools, and so forth, are growing in their dependency on AI and machine learning techniques. There's more and more data that needs to be analyzed, and quite frankly, the operators are hard-pressed to keep up. And so that data needs to be understood to be able to detect and respond to those security incidents. But that raises a pivotal question within the industry, and that is, to what degree should the AI systems be granted autonomy to make decisions? And particularly when it's a critical infrastructure, to what degree do the AI systems maybe make security decisions on behalf of operators? You know, if I think back 20, 25 years ago, antivirus systems were very much the kind of thing that, you know, pops up and says, do you want to clean or contain? Now, a lot of those things automatically respond in the background. And I think we'll start to see the need to more and more automation. And in fact, even within the space industry, AI is being used for the control of massive constellations, for example. And so if AI is already trusted in some areas of space for some of these applications, then why not also for the security of those same applications? All of those are questions, I think, that as an industry, as cybersecurity practitioners, we need to start to ask ourselves. The other aspect that comes to my mind is supply chain security. The space industry is an extremely complex one that involves many, many different suppliers at many different levels, all the way from the physical bolts and things that are used to actually assemble the satellites and the launchers and so forth, all the way through to the complex applications that control them. And along the way, there is information, intellectual property, valuable intellectual property that passes from one hand to another. And so we have to look at better and more improved ways of controlling that, of securing that. Our model-based systems engineering approaches, for example, how do we add security to the model-based systems engineering approach? How do we pass the files, the MBSE files from one hand to another? And so all of these are areas that we really need to watch for. Yeah. So these are just a few thoughts from me. Thank you very much, John, for the time again. And thank you everyone else for the interest in the talk. Hopefully these would cause some let's say some inspiring thoughts or trigger some thought processes. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Doug. I think you've set the scene very well there in terms of the complex environment that space operates within, and also the societal reliance on space. And in that context, Stefano, I guess it's a good time to bring you into the conversation to talk about how EUSPA is responding to those threats and the importance of cybersecurity within the EU space programs.
Good afternoon, John. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for inviting to this very interesting webinar. I think I have to share what Doug has described so far, because we have experienced pretty much everything that he's been talking about almost on a daily basis in our context, clearly. But just let me answer your question, starting from the context. The EUSPA program, you mentioned the EUSPA program. The EUSPA program is is a new program of the European Union. It has been established last year, so it's a new thing for the European Union. It evolves from programs like Galileo and Copernicus, which were the flagships of the European Union for what concerns space program. And now the EU space program includes new components, as they are called, GovSatcom, SSA and SST. You mentioned that earlier. Clearly, the introduction of an EU space program is an opportunity for the European Union, because for the first time, the old programs like Galileo, EGNOS, Copernicus become components of a bigger program, of a bigger space program of the Union. And therefore they are planned to be managed in a sort of integrated fashion, all together, basically. Together with the setup of the EU space program, the EU agency for the space program has been set up as well, leveraging on the experience of the EU GNSS agency, the former GSA. Which was focused on navigation programs like Galileo and EGNOS. This is because since the beginning, here it comes security, the security aspect. Security has been a core function of the former GSA. Security was hard-coded since the first regulation of the GSA, when it was called at the beginning the GNSS Supervisory Authority. I remember when I started to work at the GSA like 15 years ago, there were full pages in the regulation fully dedicated to security aspects, security tasks, and that was an interesting time when we had to set up all these new things, you know, like which were paving the way, like in security in space from an EU point of view. With the introduction of the space program, clearly EUSPA has grown up accordingly from the GSA. The agency has become EUSPA. Today, it's mainly focused on the operations of Galileo and EGNOS, clearly for the provision of services, and like this system provide services to users, including governmental users. This is an aspect that we shall not forget. For example, the public regulated service is an encrypted and robust navigation service that is provided by Galileo to governmental users or governmentally authorized users. And this is an important element of the agency. We shall not forget that the agency also supports the European Commission in the setup of the new components now. With the new space program, the agency supports the European Commission, and in particular, the agency supports the Commission in the definition of the security governance also for the new components. The agency also manages directly some operational centers, which are currently dedicated to the security monitoring of Galileo. And the aim and the ambition of the agency is also to extend these security monitoring capabilities of the agency to the other components of the space program, because in order to exploit also not only the experience but also the synergies. Another aspect of the agency which is linked to security, which we shall not forget, is the security accreditation. The security accreditation is an important sort of security certification process, which is managed by the agency through the Security Accreditation Board, which is a body of the agency, again, hard-coded in the agency regulation. It is composed of experts of the member states. And the role of this board has evolved as well with the establishment of the EU Space Program Agency, because its original mandate, which was focused only on navigation system, it has been extended to also the new components. So it will cover also Copernicus, it will cover Gov.com, it will cover SSA. So like lots of work to do in that respect. Now, Doug said very well, the space systems, and in this case, the EU space components are used worldwide. Galileo itself, it has billion of users. The space infrastructure supports our daily lives, our economy. This is without a doubt. The space assets have become essential, in particular in support of critical applications and operations, like humanitarian and environmental disasters. I mean, this is a typical set of applications where they used, and they also very important when safety of people is at stake. They are very much used in that respect. Think about Copernicus as well. It provides Earth observation for several fields of application. Now it's used everywhere. Now, the space assets have therefore become essential and have to be protected. This is basically the main message that we have, I think, out of this talk. In particular now, Doug mentioned that the threats to the space assets have increased a lot, from kinetic attacks to cybersecurity attacks. Sometimes we talk about hybrid attacks as well, and these have to be taken into account, and they add complexity to the picture. Here is where the agency, like with the introduction of the space program, is also called to play its role. The agency, the way the agency has been set up, covers the whole life cycle of security to a certain extent. The agency supports the definition of the security governance. So at the beginning of like the concept design of the definition of the roles, the responsibility of the different actors, and you know that space systems, and in particular in the European Union, the actors involved are many, and with different roles, with different responsibility. But setting up the security governance is the first step. Then there is an implementation phase, and then ensuring the operations, secure operations, security monitoring. This is an essential role that the agency covers until the certification process, if you want, until the security accreditation process. So to a certain extent, the agency covers the whole life cycle of security. Now, like I said, having all the space components grouped into one space program it's quite important. It's a new thing. It helps clearly in ensuring an integrated approach for what concerns the management, for what concerns potentially the protection of all the components, for what concerns the governance, the security governance, and its implementation in all the space system. But it's also a big opportunity, the opportunity to exploit synergies among the different components. The different components can support each other to improve or increase resilience of the system themselves. Imagine using Gov.com to ensure continuity of communication for the other systems, or the SST component clearly monitoring the assets in space, and in order to protect them as much as possible. We had an experience last year with the first maneuver to avoid collision, like for one Galileo satellite. It's a good story. It's a good story, and it's a good experience. It was the first experience for us. It was we managed it, and it was but it was a new thing, and like we see that it's real. You know, like the threat is there. Collisions are quite a relevant threat for our assets. Also, and then maybe this is the last point on which then we can discuss later, the agency is designed to have an operational role. Like I said, we ensure the operations of the system, the provision of the services. We have actual operational centers. We manage directly operational center for security monitoring. This makes and puts the agency at the heart of the protection of the EU space assets, because when it comes to protecting an operational system, only the operator, only the people having hands on the system in real time can protect the system in real time. So this is more or less to give you like an overview of what the agency is focused on for what concerns security, and it really captures all the aspects that Doug had mentioned in his introduction.
Thank you, Stefano. Thank you. Just to remind the audience, the Q&A is just about here. So if you have any questions for our panel, please pose these questions in the Q&A below. So just coming to you now, Massimo. So within that context, it's a very complex context, lots of missions, lots of complexity from ground to satellite and the data distribution beyond. Could you give us an insight into ESA's strategy and how ESA is approaching the cybersecurity issues, and how it ensures that its space programs are well protected on behalf of the member states?
So first of all, thank you, John, and good afternoon to everybody. A lot of very good message has been already driven by Doug and Stefano with different perspective, industrial perspective, institutional, and it is most important to start from a common point that Doug said at the beginning. The international context is in dynamic and exponential evolution for the threat landscape. We are fully aware in the European Space Agency. We are fully aware in the world. I mean, Stefano has already defined the strategy at EU level. And I can say that at the European Space Agency level, since the beginning of 2019, at least where I took up my duty, ESA is fully aware about the dynamic evolution of the threat landscape. And what we have done, first of all, we have upgrade and update our ESA security framework in synergy with all our ESA member states. And we approve it in Council in July 2020. This is an important passage because it allows us to say that the new ESA security framework is really at the frontier today, able to face the future threat landscape on the next 10 years. The new security framework defines the security governance of the European Space Agency. In particular, I belong to the ESA security, I'm leading the ESA Security Office, reporting to the Director General and belonging to a special entity called DG5, in charge to define, implement the strategy of the Director General. We are supported by our member state, the Security Committee, and the Cybersecurity InfoSec panel. We work in synergy with EU and with Commission, thanks to a special security agreement which recognize our security framework. In which way we are organizing, in which way we tackle the security in ESA. And in my explanation, I will try also to answer the good question that I already see in the panel. So the security is starting with the security strategy. The security strategy in ESA, in my office, I'm the job, the objective to look forward 10 years in front of us and to see and to analyze the evolution of the threat landscape. to analyze the threat landscape in order to start up in the present, which kind of policy, technology, and security requirement are necessary now to protect the future. And this is the security strategy for us. There is an engineering department that is working across directorate among the overall ESA only to analyze the future and start the right measures in the present to be ready to face this threat landscape. Then we work in the space domain. My team is integrated in all space programs in order to support each directorate during the life cycle of the space system. I fully share what Stefano said in his speech, security, and let me add that security is fundamental factor that need to start at the beginning and they need to follow the full life cycle of system design and development. We are there. We start during the ITT, analyzing the mission of the space system, trying to define the risk analysis and set up the minimum basic security requirement that will evolve during the life cycle of the system, with the objective of provide a certification statement and accreditation statement. The certification statement allow as a member state and our stakeholder, our partner, to be sure that the space system is designed, developed, and in case operated in accordance to our security framework. So our security framework dictates the standard, the principle, and the requirement that are characterize the security of each our member state. So it's a stamp of assurance that the system is secure from engineering perspective. And then we have the accreditation. The accreditation at the very end, it allows our stakeholder, our ESA member state, to be reassured that the final system, the space system, has an acceptable level of risk. I talk about security strategy, I talk about space system, corporate security and policy is another important pillar that derives directly from the strategy in order to implement transversally at ESA level every best practice. I always used to say we are developing a secure environment in which to design, develop, operate secure system. This is very important because only with the combination of two, secure environment and secure system, we can deliver to our stakeholder, in particular to EU, let's say the assurance in terms of integrity, in terms of confidentiality, in terms of availability that our systems are working and are adequately protected in accordance to our security framework. And then we have the pillar of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a transversal pillar that I lead with transversally in ESA with all my colleagues that derive directly from the analysis once more of the ESA security strategy. Is organized in, let's say, two main branches: cybersecurity resilience and cybersecurity technology. First of all, and I want to link this argument to one of these questions. The question was, yes, a very good message, but could you give us, let's say, an example of threat? Yes, today, the different example of threat that we are living, but let me say that we are living in the last 10 years, are the kind of threat that can attack, can affect a ground segment, a signal in space like spoofing and jamming, and why not also the satellite. The security strategy in my area is in charge also to analyze the threat profile of the attacker. that in different phases of the design development of the system can be focused for espionage, can be focused to fanfare skill and to detriment the service, or if we talk about a very structured organization, even to keep control of the space system and to use as a tool of attack. So you see that the panorama of threat in space is completely, let's say, broad and different. And we need to be prepared to face of that. So we are prepared with security strategy, corporate level, space system security and cybersecurity, technology and resilience. In particular, I am responsible of to define the cybersecurity resilience of ESA and technology. ESA today has launched two major programs, that is the CSOC and SCOE. Today, globally, it does not exist anything similar in Europe, let me say, because the CSOC will have the unique capability to monitoring any kind of threat in space and on Earth. And it is working in synergy with the SCOE, the Security Center of Excellence, that is a platform able to emulate any space program, to associate to this space program a particular threat catalog, and the user can test real hardware and software in this emulated environment to validate their security operational procedure or to perform training. But I wanted more. I want cybersecurity for everybody, because I strongly believe that security and cybersecurity is something to be shared in order to win this challenge. So, and to be shared with everybody need to be in somehow easy to use. The cyber resilience of ESA, for ESA mission, for ESA member state, and for whoever want to use it, is a distributed capability. So will be in ESEC in Belgium, in ESRIN, in ESOC, with different role. Even more, I have created the CPOP, the Cyber Portable Operational Platform. It's a portable platform that can be deployed everywhere. And with this portable platform, you will have the capability to use the full potentiality of the cyber resilience in ESA. This is the present and the short-term future, because this procurement, this system will be real in end of 2023, beginning of 2024. But we already scheduled the future. One of these questions was, well, what about the quantum technology? Quantum technology is a very interesting challenge, but we don't have to forget that the quantum technology applied to security need an important factor to be discovered, and it is the certification of the quantum technology. Without certification, it will be quite difficult to use quantum technology applied to security. ESA, in the medium term this time, 23-25, is launching an important laboratory to analyze with our National Security Agency the way to certify the quantum technology. In addition of that, in terms of technology, we are launching in 2023-2025 several projects structuring the security for satellite, ground segment, signal space, giving a standard, an homogeneous standard for everybody. What I want to say, the security in the space context is a really challenge. And I'm keen always, you see, John, to be part of webinar and interview in order to strengthen really the power between ESA, institution like Commission, Stefano, EUSPA, industry. There is the strong willing in Europe to have an holistic vision in security and cybersecurity. And what we are developing in ESA together with industry and let me say in synergy with Commission can really represent the first node on an important networking that to share information, capability, expertise for Europe. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Massimo, and thank you for answering our first question as well. That was really useful. So we have a few questions coming in, and maybe give let's say Doug the opportunity to also respond to that first question. And really, I'd like to elaborate that a little bit and say the question is it possible to make some practical examples of cyber threats that happened in the space domain, and how can quantum technology can help in the security of the space domain, which Massimo answered really well. But maybe, Doug, how is the space domain different from, let's say, other critical infrastructures? And can some of the lessons learned from space be applied into other critical infrastructures as well? So just elaborating that question somewhat.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, in terms of practical examples, I would just raise the Viasat example that has happened so recently, and the publications now are really just coming out within the last month that talk about actually what happened, right? And so in that case, there was a malware that attacked some modems and therefore disrupted communications. And in fact, the effects of that are still being felt in a variety of areas. And so in that case, it's a situation where, you know, perhaps a technique that was applicable in a non-space context has been applied directly into a space context. And so we don't need to look actually very far to see how the threats are going to proliferate into space. They don't necessarily have to be specifically space unique in that sense, but that the techniques that are already available and already being used in other domains are moving into space. As we look, and maybe I'm bridging a little bit between the first question and the last question there around, you know, the futures and so forth. Contextualize that kind of an idea into then what's potential on the satellite. We see already that there are weaknesses in implementations in ground-based systems, desktops, for example. Well, we can have vulnerabilities that can get exploited that may be deployed on the satellite, and something that's deployed on the satellite, that the context of space makes it that much more difficult to try to mitigate that after the fact. We can fairly easily apply a patch to a desktop system. We can't necessarily quite so easily, but this is part of what we have to address in terms of the approaches that we solve the problem. How do we let's say reburn a flash, or how do we reload software, and how do we make sure that we can address those vulnerabilities that may be applicable in the space system? I think all of us touched on the radio frequency issues, and how radio frequency interference on the satellite itself can affect then the electronics. Maybe you know, from a space situation awareness, we don't all understand the full impact of how radio frequency, electromagnetic issues, and so forth can fundamentally affect the electronics. And so how do we need to then monitor actually what's going on the satellite to be able to then give some kind of an indication to the ground that something's going on? Yeah. I'm touching on these things in very, very high level, but it's, you know, these are all examples that we could dive into a whole lot more detail.
Exactly. And Stefano, I passed the question on to you, but maybe related to the second part of the question regarding quantum technology as well. How is EUSPA and the European Commission responding to this, the quantum question, if you like, around quantum technology?
Yes, Doug, thanks for this question. And there are clearly ideas, and there are programs that the European Commission has activated in that respect. There are big expectations around quantum technology for its use also in space, in the space dimension, in the space domain, for several things. There are ideas. There is the ambition of using quantum technology, for example, for quantum key distribution. This is something that Doug has mentioned earlier as well. It's one of the possible applications that could use quantum technology. You can imagine that cryptography is used in the space systems, like in many other IT systems. It's quite essential for the protection of the information that flows through the system and from the system to the system, from the ground to the space. Space to space, you know, like there's lots of cryptography now embedded in the space assets, and clearly cryptography is driven with cryptographic keys. You know, like having the right key at the right time is essential in order to decrypt and encrypt the messages and the information that is exchanged in the system. Clearly, this is one of the first application that is being analyzed at the moment. But like Massimo said, that there are also other projects, like in the short, medium, and then medium long term as well. And one important element was mentioned by Massimo is related to certification as well. And certification is essential, in particular when these cryptographic technologies through quantum are planned to be used for encryption, decryption, protection of potentially classified information. This is something that is going to be investigated as well. Clearly, you know that classified information can be protected only with technologies and with systems which are certified, which are secured, and you know, like with a security stamp on top from a relevant authority. And this is something that the European Union is working on as well, together with the member states. In the short medium term, there's like something launched also for this purpose, in order to gather all the competencies also from the member states to build up a sort of let's say sort of a lab, sort of a workshop where this can be analyzed, can be tested as well, and can be also formalized, because anytime you talk about certification, you also have to identify standards that you have to certify against. So it's quite like a big work, you know, like, yeah. And then a big job to do. Yes.
Thanks, Stefano. And so coming on to the next question. So what size of security teams are in EUSPA and ESA? I mean, this is an interesting question, because we ran a RHEA Talk fairly recently about developing skills within the cyber sector, and you know, I think that's generally thought there's a bit of a lack of people entering the cybersecurity world. But yeah, so the question is, what size are the security teams in EUSPA and ESA? And do you have the means to manage such critical dimension in all your programs? Now, Massimo, I'll start with you here, because you also mentioned, and I think you've all mentioned the automation part of trying to make systems more automated, trying to recognize these threats more easier to reduce the load on the teams. But could you give us a bit of an insight into the answer to that question?
Of course, and it is an important question. And behind this question, there is the security culture of an agency. So I will answer you in this way. I will never be satisfied until my answer will be that the full ESA is thinking in security. So in theory, I have the full ESA right now approaching an activity or a system, at least using a part of the brain, a part of the management approach, asking and saying something, okay, but from security standpoint, what I can do? We are very lucky on this point, John, because without hiding anything, of course, there is always a lot to do in terms of culture. Yeah. But the framework of ESA is very well structured. I have a team, let's say, spread in ESRIN, in ESTEC, in Belgium, everywhere. And in addition, each directorate, they appoint a certain number of people that functionally reporting also to the directors and to the different directors and to the ESA security office. In this configuration, we are able really to increase the culture of the people, follow up the activity at corporate level and a space domain level. But what is more important is to increase the level of coordination. Every 3 weeks, I'm doing an ESA security coordination board only for ESA. And I'm telling you that in this period of COVID, we really test the robustness of team or other tools, because we were hundreds of people putting on the table a security problem and how to solve it all together. So I believe that yes, today we have the means, we have the need, and we have the people, but the challenge is not finished. We really need to build up, not at agency level, that this is a permanent job, to increase the, let's say, the culture of ESA, the culture of security. But we need to act everybody to increase the culture at European level, in Europe. So we really need, again, to have a new networking in security, in cybersecurity.
Okay. Thanks, Massimo. And that leads very well on to Stefano. I'll pose the same question to you, Stefano, and maybe also elaborate on the role of training and awareness in this particular question.
Yeah, clearly, John. It's the question is, I think it's pertinent, and I didn't mention that in my introduction, but evolving the GSA into EUSPA means for us also a change of mindset, because the agency is growing not only from point of view of responsibility with respect to the EU space program, and working also on the other space components, but like I said, security was hard-coded in the core of the agency since the beginning. And if you look at the regulation, you look at the real core tasks of the agency, 4 out of 5 tasks are security related. The security is clearly a pillar and an enabler of the space program and all the components, in particular to provide secure services. And this has triggered a reflection internally in order to make sure that security is clearly considered everywhere. In particular, we asked the question ourselves on how we could ensure security by design efficiently, considering that we had already an experience with Galileo and EGNOS, and how could we export this experience into the new components. We have an opportunity, especially for new components that are being defined and developed now, to introduce the security by design concept, and this is what we are trying to do. And this has led also to we asked the question ourselves, and this has led to an evolution also in the organizational structure of the agency. Now, if you look at how the agency is getting organized now, you will see, first of all, several entities, several departments that in their name have security. We have a security accreditation department, we have a security authority, we have security engineering, we have security monitoring, we have security operations. We have many of those because we focus on security, but there's been an important step done in the organizational structure of the agency, where security people have been also moved to different departments. So the departments that are working directly on the programs now embed security people, and as we call them, security evangelists, that have the role of not only coordinating the work technically strictly related to security, but also make sure that the awareness of security is spread and it's increased inside inside the agency. And this is one move. The second move is that when defining the organization of the agency, the department have been defined in a way that they are not focused on a single site of the agency. The agency is multi-site agency, has centers in France, in Spain. Headquarters is located in Prague. And we have other offices as well. Now the departments are multi-site departments, and that enables us to spread the security word like more easily, if you want, or if you want, differently with respect to the past. The awareness, this is a sort of like I like to call these people like security evangelists, because I like the term, also because we really need it. Massimo said it very well. We need to spread the word. We are active as much as possible, like Massimo said as well, in this type of events, exactly because we believe it's essential to spread the word, and that to make everybody aware that security is it's not something that goes against the development of the system. It's actually an enabler, and it has to be included in the design from the beginning, because the services that we provide are for everybody, for the citizens, for everybody, and they have to be secure. So this type of awareness is something that we take really seriously, and internally as well. The training is increased, in particular for what concerns the cybersecurity threats. We have a cyber training program which is developed and implemented on a yearly basis at different level with different competencies, depending on the different competencies of the staff in the agency, and this is very relevant. You know, that technology, in particular in cyber, evolves like in a snap, and like what we learned today is already obsolete once you talk about it, you know, like, and so we need to be all updated with the evolution of the technology.
Well, yeah, with that in mind, actually, the last question we have is, what are some of the future threats foreseen for the next 10 years? You said it always evolves. Is it possible to have some examples of security measures adopted for satellites in the cybersecurity field? I don't know, Doug, do you want to answer that? And maybe also with respect to the convergence of information technology, IT, and operations technology, OT, within this environment, what those future challenges may hold.
Yeah, so just a few thoughts come to mind, and let's say in terms of future threats in the next 10 years. Earlier in the conversation, we were talking about the hybrid situation, and I think we're going to see. So currently, I mean, as we've expressed, we're already seeing that the ground systems are targets, and so the ground infrastructures, we already need to take measures, and we are already taking measures to protect them. I think as we look towards the future, we will start to see, let's say, a migration even, or an evolution of those attacks moving directly into space. And what does that look like from a hybrid perspective? The congestion within space, the proximity of different satellites and so forth that are in space. As that congestion grows, as things start to become closer and closer together, you're going to see more and more effects of radio interference. There's the potential for active use of kinetic threats in space. And what does that look like? And how all of those, in fact, can then influence and have effect in the cyber domain. And so this whole nature of the hybrid threat, which itself is a convergence as well of IT and OT, but let's say, or the cyber physical, as it's also called. I think that's an evolution of threats that are something that we're going to have to look at. The whole convergence of IT and OT, actually, there's a whole aspect of that is, in fact, not technology related, and it has to do with the fact that these two worlds, the culture behind critical infrastructure operations technologies and information technologies, the culture has a very different dynamic in many ways, and the governance mechanisms in place to bring these two worlds together. And we see that not just in the space domain, we see that in utilities domain, we see that in other domains, that just bringing those cultures together is a challenge in and of itself. Even beyond just the technology side. So there's a lot of things that we're going to have to look at.
Unfortunately, we seem to have run out of time. Thanks for that, Doug, and thank you to Massimo and to Stefano for what was a really interesting conversation. Hopefully, you got a bit of insight from there. As I mentioned, this session has been recorded, so if you need to. If you'd like to see a playback of it, visit www.rheagroup.com. And we look forward to seeing you at the next RHEA Talk. So thank you, the panel, and thank you for watching.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.